Welcome everybody to another meetup of Eindhoven Financial Independence. So my name is Peter, I'm your host today, and our presenter is Melih. Melih is originally from Turkey. He's a software engineer by profession. He's been investing for I think about 4 years now.
Yep.
He's also very passionate about topics like philosophy. He's a martial artist and also does running. And so he's gonna tell us today about a book that he's been studying. And so this is a book about interest. We will have a historical overview of how interest played a role in human societies and how we can, in the end, take advantage of it ourselves, for example, through savings accounts, and maybe also understand how central banks play a role in determining the direction of the stock markets and how this is also important for us as investors. So I will give the floor to Melih. Yeah. And if you have any questions during the presentation, just raise the hand. And yeah.
Thank you, Petar. So I think that was a good introduction. I think I wanted to understand. I read a book on interest, and I just wanted to share. And also in general, I would say maybe we can start. So the topic is the price of time, because that's what interest is. When we have, let's say, 100 euros, and then we say, hey, I'll pay you back one year later, and then they say, the other person will say, then you pay this much, and then that this much is that price of time, because you have 100 euros now, 100 euros 1 year later, and then the money you earned, but in the difference is the money you paid for the time, actually. So I would say that's a very good description of interest. So I want to say why I care about financial literacy in the first place. In my view, that's the reason, or that's the way that we can be more free and we can understand the economy. And we live in a world, I think, that kind of tries to hide that part. Like we are trained as in our job, and we do our job, and then we do our thing. But I would say that there's a whole mechanism about how economics works, and if we understand that better, that's just we understand the world better. In my view, that's why I care about it. For me, it's attached to freedom. And why interest? I would say my understanding of interest was limited. That's why I wanted to learn more and then share. Because interest, we hear a lot about it in the economy, in the news, and if you just hear the news, it's all they talk about. The interest was high or low, it was raised or lowered. There's a tool that they're trying to control, like the government, central banks, people, to control the whole economy, and that metric, I thought that deserves more understanding. And I want to give a disclaimer. I'm an enthusiast, just like you. Don't take any of my word for any of this. I try my best, but yeah, also this is not financial advice. Actually, the topic of today will not even touch the last 100 years, even maybe last, yeah, around there we'll stop, because I don't want to also give like a very how to say, like, my opinion on how the interest rate plays at this current moment. We can do that together in a more informal setting. Then I will share my opinion. So I want to talk about the book that is referenced to this presentation. So it's called The Price of Time, and it's by Edward Chancellor, an economist, and it's about history of interest. And it's actually been published in July 7, 2022. And if you read the book from beginning to end, I would say it makes a case. It makes a case against not having so low interest, because if you think about it, still when this book was coming out, we were just out of COVID, and in COVID the interest rate was down to zero, and then there were a lot of money printing, and everything was super expensive. Inflation was super high, still is high. And then I would say the goal of this book, in my opinion, is that this the author wants to make a case that this free money is not so free. Let's just be careful. I would say by the time this was published, and I think even in the forward you can see that that the author claims, oh, I was right already, because free money is not so great, and um, the anyway. But that's why I chose not to follow the book one-on-one, because I'm not trying to make a case against easy money, maybe for it. I don't know. Not, but I just want to understand it, and then yeah, even not on interest. I would say maybe one more thing I want to mention. So I grew up in a Muslim country. I'm Muslim, and in the religion, like interest is like illegal or whatever. And then I try to understand like why, and then is this real, and then the question like of like if that's not allowed in certain thoughts, religions, and then why is it allowed in other ways? Is it manufactured? Is it a real concept? That's why I wanted to go deeper on this topic. So the outline is going to be, I want to make a small demo on understanding interest, which I think will help us. Then I want to take some questions from you. Any crazy questions you have. Not that I'm going to answer, but I just want to hear what bothers your mind. And then we want to talk about, is interest natural? Where does it come from? And then we'll go a bit of a history as far as it goes. And then we want to see if interest can be controlled. If we are now in the central bank regime where central banks determine what the level of interest is. Great. But then is there a limit to how can they raise the interest rate up to 50 and that's okay? And then they can lower it down to -5 and that's also okay? What are the limits? What determines the natural rate of interest versus the control one? And then I want to mention some historical events mentioned in the book. Again, not going to the recent ones because there's more controversy and more nuance. And then we'll talk about like how you can utilize interest for your saving accounts. So, just want to be on the same page. Interest is, we have some principal, we have some rate, and then we have a term. 1 year later, I want 5% interest, and then I lend you 100 euros. After 1 year, I want 105 back. That's called simple interest. And if we, after 1 year, we have now 105 euros, and then if we try to take interest on that the next year, this is called compound interest. So the principal amount is added, or sorry, the interest is added to the principal, then it's calculated again. And we have, of course, throughout this presentation, you will hear about one kind of interest, but that's not the case. We have short-term interest, long-term interest, and we have overnight funds rate. This is actually the reason I wanted to mention this. This is the rate when you hear in the news, it says the interest was now raised up to 4.5. That 4.5 is actually is the overnight funds rate. It doesn't actually mean the short term or long term. So that's why there are many different, not many, but let's say a few types on also, like different kinds of interests. And then what we will talk about throughout this presentation is going to be just one. Doesn't mean it's one. Just I'm trying to tell you, but they're all related in my opinion. So I want to ask you a question. Who has a savings account? Like who has a savings account and making money using interest? Can you raise your hand? Okay, quite a few. Nice. So I want to ask one person to come up to stage. I just want to have a 1 minute chat on one topic, one question I want to ask. Is there a volunteer for a question? Do you want to come? Do you want to come to the stage? I just want to ask a question. Yeah. Okay. So I want to borrow money from you, like really for real. I need 100 euros. I'm gonna pay you back 1 year later. Yeah. How much? Like, are you okay just giving me 100 euros and I'll pay you back 100 euros next year?
No.
Why not?
It's not going to be the same as today.
Okay. Then, what's the amount that will make you happy?
105.
105.
Yeah.
That's nice. That's fair. Then, how did you come up with this? Not 104 or 6 or 5. What made you give this 5% rate?
Depending on the inflation now, it looks high, and the value of the money is getting lower and lower. So 5% would be average, let's say.
Okay, then let's say that I asked money from you in 10 years. You'll give me 100 euros, and in 10 years, I will pay you back how much? 100 euros. Or what is the interest level that you want from me in 10 years?
I have to do calculation then.
But
yeah,
your
we have to
reference
combine
rate,
the 4-5%.
you want a compound interest over 5%.
Yes.
Not more? Okay.
Or 4-5, we can make average between them. Yeah. Because
Okay.
I don't think it's good to take 5% constant value.
All right, that's I also like that. Okay, great. Then can I have the mic? Thank you. This was I think this was the kind of conversation I wanted to have. You look at the market, and then you decide like how much like the value of anything changes, or let's say inflation, and then you realize that okay, now in 1 year maybe 5% of value added to my euro is a fair value. I think so. Maybe I just want to have like me. You can shout out or use the mic. What kind of questions do you have on interest, on economy, like on banks? Do you have any questions that you have in mind that bothers you? As I said, mine was like, is interest a natural phenomenon? That was my question that was bothering me. Is it a fake thing? Is the government trying to control us with interest? Do you have any questions in mind? That any crazy question? What is a bank? Why are there central banks? Like anything.
Maybe who determines interest rates?
Like who exactly the person?
And based on what?
Good question. Anything else?
How they calculate it?
Good question.
Actually, yeah, thank you. I think the nature of interest and definition of interest, actually I'm asking, maybe it's better to ask. If you cover the content, let's say before, like from 100 years ago and before that, is the concept of interest would be very different from today. Because if you go in the very, in let's say ancient time and past history, we didn't have the concept of fiat money.
Yeah.
And the interest on something intrinsically valuable or precious, or something that is linked at least to some intrinsically valuable things, and interest on those things are very I would say naturally are very different from interest on fiat money.
Very good question. I'm not going to answer. I just want more questions.
Will the ECB lower the rate again?
Yeah, good question. Good question. Will maybe the mic wasn't there, so will the ECB lower the rates again? Good question. I don't know. I am not planning to answer. I just want to hear. Okay. Do you have an answer?
Yeah, when was the first interest in the history?
Okay.
Do you know?
I'm not trying to answer the questions. I just want to hear like what bothers your mind. That's all right. Thank you for this input. Again, like I have no intention of answering this, but just that I just want your minds to get churning, and what bothers you is something that I want to know as a presenter. So the reason I was so interested in this book, it gives us 5 millennia of interest in one chart, and it's not such a stupid chart that really like was surprising to me. If you look at like 5,000 years ago, so this is short-term interest, it was around 20%, and then even if you look at I don't know like around the time of Christ, it's like 4%ish. Then at around 1890s, it was around 4 or 5, and then even like recently, let's not cover this peak, but generally you see that you can put all interest in the whole world that we know in all our recordings, and it's not like such a skewed graph, and that's very interesting, I think. Of course, there are points in time where interest has been risen up to, I don't know, 500% for a little while, but I think when you average it out, we see such a graph, and I think that really tells us something. Yes, please.
I have a question. What interest rate is this? Is it United States, European, or Turkey? If it can be.
We mean in this all chart?
Yeah.
Very good question. In general, we're averaging out the whole world.
Okay.
But I think hopefully in like 10 minutes you will be able to answer what is that, because it starts in certain place and stuff. But if you talk about 1965, I think this is mostly Western countries. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So let's go to the ancient world where interest started. So Babylonia is where interest started, and it was written in tablets. So people would, if they give a loan, they write in tablets, hey, like this person owes me this much money and in this much interest, and with this collateral and sort of things like that. And it was actually the first account of we know, or like when you look at anthropology, and if you will ask when this interest ever first started, it actually didn't start in, it started before writing. Like it started with gift exchanges. So let's say that this tribe came to this other tribe and gave them 5 goats. So next year, when they go back to this other tribe, they were kind of in custom were giving 6 goats. And the reason is because if you have 5 goats, they make another baby and it becomes 6 in 1 year. So then it's actually a bit rude to give just 5 back, because nature is productive and you want to appreciate that production. Or if it's grain, you give them, I don't know how much grain, but then you plant that grain and then you get more grain out. And if you just give the seeds back, that's a bit of a rude thing. So I think in anthropology, it's thought that the first ever interest actually comes from gift exchanges. And it was actually, money was invented by Lydians, I think, not as the Babylonians are older. I cannot recall the time, but basically it was. So basically, even before we had coin money, and not any money. So maybe Petra can discuss that in the other meetup. So meaning that money doesn't have to be a coin, but it was invented before coin. And Babylonians, congrats to them, also invented compound interest. So in their tablets, they were saying things like, if you return in 2 years, in 1 year it's 5%. If you return in 2 years, then we'll take the principal amount back. And that's super interesting that they would start doing that already, those calculations, even back then. They were not stupid, Another question maybe I have to the audience. I don't want the answer now, I just want your mind churning. So if you look at this graph, you see that from 5,000 before Christ to like 500 after Christ, so this is 0. You see that in Babylonia, the interest rate starts with 20%, it goes down to 10, and it goes up again. In Greece also you see this U-curve, also this Rome, you see this U-curve. So this is thought not to be a coincidence. Just think about what it can be. We'll answer it, but. So we go to Babylon. So Babylon was an empire in Fertile Crescent, and this is the capital, and these are the set tablets. So very interestingly, I'm sure you've all heard about Hammurabi laws. So you cannot kill if you kill, or you die, or something like that. That kind of laws. Most of them were about interest. I think that was a shocking information for me. So I don't know how many hundreds of rules were there, but most of them were concerning loans and interest and what if you don't pay back, what happens if you take a collateral. And in the law, the interest was maximum set at 20%. You cannot charge more than 20 or Hammurabi will come at you. That was the thing. And then it was mostly on barley and animals. And then there were like collaterals for borrowing. Let's say you borrow, and there's actually a case written in tablets of a person taking someone else's wife as collateral. I don't know how much money that guy owed, but he had the wife of other person stay at his home until that money was paid. And it was mostly institutionalized. There were private lending as well, but usually the temples were the biggest source of where these lendings happened. So we go to ancient Greece. Also, private and public loans exist, and also the Temple of Apollo is the biggest lender, and it famously gave loans of barley at at 10% for 300 years constantly, regardless of the wars, regardless of what happened, regardless of the climate, and if there were more barley or less barley. I think, of course, there might be nuances into this, so maybe we missed a bit of a history here and there, but that is also valuable information of if interest is linked to wars, if interest is linked to climate or whatever, or if it's about the productivity level of nature or whatever it is. And interestingly, the philosophers that we know now, like Thales, Aristo, and all these Greek philosophers, almost all of them were against interest, and they were like, money is for trading. I think that's it's not to exchange, it's not to earn more money from. That was their thought. And there's this term usury, which is the action or the practice of lending money at an unreasonably high rate of interest. So if you look at what these ancient philosophers wrote, it was, usury is bad, and it corrupts people, and that kind of stuff you see a lot in their writing. But in this book's case, they're talking about unreasonably high rates, not any rates. So we go to Rome, and maybe also answer our question. So at the peak of its power, at around, I think, 100 years before Christ, they were at the peak or something around here. The interest rate was down to 4%, and when the empire got weakened, it went up to 12%. And if you think about it, these empires, when they were starting, they had high interest, and then when they were at the peak of their powers, the interest got low, and then when they lost power again, the interest was high. So this U curve is actually this U shape is associated with how the empire was thriving or not, and when they lost power, usually the interest was. Yeah, very good explain. Institutional stability is a good way to call it. Yeah.
Could it be also that people lost trust in each other, and then they demand a higher interest because they are more concerned about getting the money back?
I think that's probably very correct.
That also is linked actually to the this also is linked to the institutional stability, because if you have a strong government that can protect you as a citizen, for example, Hammurabi laws, that if it is in the power and can arrange the relation between you and me, govern that properly, then the risk of me lending the money to you will be lower, and the interest will be lower proportionally. But if the institutional stability goes down, the government becomes miserable, then it's natural that it cannot manage the relation between me and you as two citizens.
I think so, yeah.
Good point. So yeah, I'll go to medieval Italy. So I was showing this presentation to for my friend, and he went laughing because he didn't like the term medieval Italy. But anyway, so there were actually laws against interest, usury they call it, and I think both the church and institutions, which were this almost same at the time, it was frowned upon, and it was done by lower class and or minorities or immigrants. And I think it was, for example, the Jewish people who were the minorities and also not Christians in Europe at the time that usually dealt these things because they were already frowned upon. They were already not very much liked, and that was their way of, doing getting money. And like we see that the interest was by law like not permitted, but they went around this by using foreign exchanges. They hid the interest, like, oh, you owe me this much, or they were trying tricks, let's say, on how to overcome this usury law. That's why but still, if you look at the written recordings, there were still commercial interest activity, not as much, but so you see that this rate of interest went from like 20% down to even 5%, yeah, no, 6%ish, 5%ish. So this is between, again, 1,200 and 1,570. Again, this is actually, this date is important. 1,571 was around the time when this law against usury was taken back. So now as we come to, let's say, more modern times, let's maybe take a pause and think about the level of interest, like what determines the level of interest. So in this book, The Theory of Interest, Fisher suggests 20 different reasons or let's say causes of interest, and you can make a lot of cases for it. But in its essence, nature is productive. You give someone 5 cows, then I don't know, a few years later you have more cows. So it's just reasonable that you demand more cows, that you give your 5 cows, because if you had not given that 5 cows, you'd have more cows by yourself. So why would you lose anything? And I think it's also interesting that if you look at forests, they grow by 3 to 4%. And if you have grain and you plant it, you have more next year. So I think one of the natural reasons why interest is natural, let's say, which answers my question, if interest is made up, I think it's a logical conclusion that nature is productive. Yes, you had a question?
I was wondering to what extent is nature productive?
It really depends, right? If you have a bad climate, I guess it's not, right?
Yeah, true.
So it really, I guess, depends, yeah.
Nature
And,
also is counterproductive. Can be counterproductive. You can have like 100 cows in a year. You can have 100 cows, and in a year, because of disease that hits them, you would have none after maybe 2-3 months.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you end up owing already 5 more cows to someone else.
Yeah.
That's how crisis happens. But yeah.
there might be a natural circle in the sense that when there's a saturation on the number of animals, they'll start to die off because of the limited resources. And when they start to die off, they can just come back up again when there are more resources like that.
That's actually a very good way of looking at it, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it doesn't just have to be linear, it can be cyclic. Yeah, very nice point. So, what other things that we have that might determine? Your name was Ahmed again? Yeah. How Ahmed was thinking, value of things is like increasing, or price of things is increasing about 5%. So that was his reasoning. And we look at other reasons are, you know, what is the return on real assets? If I had invested that 100 euros in the stock market, what would I get 1 year later? So that's maybe my reasoning. Or I invest in property and I get some rent back. And another argument is actually about yeah. So maybe on this like return of real assets, in actually Hammurabi laws. So it was like there were different types of interest on different things. So the 20% was for silver, so money. But if you had barley, then they demanded more because barley is much more productive. So then if you give someone barley, then you can ask for 33% barley next year, and that's okay. So also there's this thought about GDP growth. So we have like our economy is already growing at, I don't know, let's say 3%. Then it kind of makes sense that the interest would be around there somewhere, because that's how much in general you invest anywhere like blindly, you'll get 3% back. So that's another thing. And productivity, let's say you invest in like in some sector that has a lot of productivity, and then they can make that 100, 120, then that really can determine the level of interest that you might think you can get from there. Yes.
How did you? I didn't get the point. How did? I didn't get the point. How did you explain the difference between silver and barley, and how this difference explains the difference in return or interest?
So I would say, in general, yeah, this for barley, they thought that they just if you had certain barley and you grow it, you have maybe 5 times of the same grain, like because they're just the seeds. So you can use it as a seed, and then you have a lot of barley to also give back. So it's a very productive means. But maybe you're using this on you're borrowing silver to do trade in other countries, and that's risky. And then
It's more related to their. I think it's more related to the risks of giving barley, because that is a food and it can be spoiled, it can be become useless. So, but silver actually would be worthy more, because exactly the reason you say you can do trade with silver but not with barley. So that would make basically silver something even more precious to borrow.
because it doesn't lose value in time.
Yeah, because it doesn't spoil mainly, I would
Yeah.
say, and you can also do trade with it. I think this difference in interest rate between these two is more
About their
related
store
to.
value than their productivity.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Good point. Could be.
But actually, if in the book writes like this, that
No,
would be a more
it's
expert
not.
person.
It's not the Bible, right? So
Yeah.
even it's the Bible, we can argue against it. Now, we're not in medieval Italy. But good point. Yeah, please make comments like that. So also there's this argument about society's time preference. So we know that some cultures are more, let's say, impatient than others. I'm guessing like if you ask a Chinese person versus a Spanish person, I'm guessing you'd get very different like patience level. I don't think, in my opinion, I don't know many Spanish people, but at least the ones I know are super impatient people. I don't think they would wait any time. So they wouldn't want to lend money. I just want to spend it. But maybe the Chinese friends that I have, they're more like long-term thinking. And actually, you can look at societies, and some of them have actually, some societies have longer time preference. They're okay with making long-term plans, and some are just super impatient. And that also determines that society's level of interest. And so this also, like with the fiat money, I think you have monetary policy. So then they can just play around with it, I guess. And then
Instead of
it's,
putting it as
how much risk tolerance do you have, right? As a society, how much risk tolerance you have or is inbuilt. Let's say a society that has gone through wars more often than a society that has been peaceful, maybe they have more preference to to not invest in super long term because you never know the certainty period,
Ah,
right? And
that's a
versus
good
a
point.
peaceful society which has seen a lot of growth in over time, maybe they are more comfortable taking higher risk
Yeah,
to then, also, yeah, then equally change the interest rate.
good
So
point.
I think it's like what society at that point prefers as well is kind of how I'm seeing this.
Yeah, very good point. So it's as well society's risk preference as well its time preference. Yeah, very good point. So another thing, yeah. So I think I mentioned this point before. So when you look at like how the interest rate was, like for hundreds, like maybe about 1,000 years in medieval, in ancient times is the same, or like even in Greece, like this temple of Apollo gives 10% rate, whatever happens. So that also shows that, maybe like interest rate is really a complex thing. It's not, you cannot just tie it to one thing. So that's, I think, the conclusion that we need to understand here. Like, we cannot, this guy wrote a whole book, he couldn't come to a conclusion. So then that we cannot just say, oh, it's one thing. It's really complex. We can only understand the factors. And there's this argument for like this population growth, that when population is decreasing, like that, like then there's like less money, less people who has, like more people who has money, and then less people who have the time to get loans from people and like do something. So basically, there's a lot of money and not a lot of people who want money. So that's why there's let's say less. The interest goes lower because people are just don't want to get anyone's money. So then the balance of people who want to lend, who have money, and people who want money is broken because of population. And that's the argument why Japan has had negative interest rate around for 3 decades, long before we had, I think, in Europe negative interest rates just before COVID, around COVID. But Japan has had it for a long time, and they tie that to their decreasing population. And I think that's an interesting thing to think about. And there's also this interest and rent relation. When you look at the words for rent in different languages, in German it's rent, it's census, and the word for interest is Zins. It's linked. In Babylon it was exactly the same word. And in French it's rentier and renter. So basically the person who rents, and then the word for interest was rent. So because, maybe, I don't know if you want to look at your own language, is it related? Let me think about Turkish. I never thought about it. No, it's not related, I think. No. Did anyone make that connection with their language? Like, is there a relation between rent and no? Okay, but oh, really? Okay. So we have Persia again, another thing we can look at. But basically, this interest, like the way they thought about it was, a land, like let's say, so interest on like a capital is like basically you rent that capital or land or barley to someone else for 1 year. Then after 1 year you get it back. So it's in their view, or let's say in society's view, it's like renting your capital for 1 year. You give 100 euro, and then that after 1 year you get that back. So you rented your 100 euro for 5 euros. That was the thinking, and the collateral was, in ancient times, I think a lot of the time it was land. So when you gave money, like you gave money to someone, then you had their land for a while, and then as the collateral, and then when you get back, you give back the land back. So that the relation between like rent and interest has been there for a long time. So why interest exists? So also this is another question that you know got philosophers busy, and I think that why is their interest is it's to encourage people to give. Like if I didn't ask Ahmed to hey, I'll give you 105 back, he would never give me just 100, you know, and I need that 100 euro. So I need to convince him to give me money. That's basically the logic behind it. We want to encourage. And if you think about it, it's really closely tied with capitalism. And you can guess that Marx didn't like this interest concept because it was so closely linked with capitalism. Because you have that possession, ownership, and then I'm asking to use that ownership. But if you're rejecting the concept of ownership, then I guess you're not so in peace with the concept of interest as well. So, and another let's say aspect of interest was actually rationing. So some people are rich, some people are poor, and then if you're poor, you have nothing, then you go to the temple, and then you ask, hey, can I get some money? And then they give you barley, but they ask a bit more. But this way, they are at least giving you something, you know? And this is kind of a rationing. Like the have-nots have at least one place where they can get this, this barley or food. Maybe they need to pay back a bit more, but at least the rationale is that now it gives you a way to, like this interest gives you a way for the poor to get some food at least. And yeah, again, like some people have time, like they have the capital, they have the time, and some people they don't have the capital, and then you can transact across time. You can transact. We can do trade now, but if I don't have anything, how can we do trade? But if we have interest in mind, we can trade in 1 year, so we can transact across time. And actually, when you look at, so this is an interesting thing. So if you look at the recordings of interest across history, there were like higher interest in overseas loans and insurance against shipwreck. So it was like, even though like this, we're talking about 2,000 years ago, like in ancient Greece or something, still, I think even in Babylonia, you had this concept of, you know, like insurance already there. If the ship is wrecked, then okay, you don't need to pay. But if you're doing going on an overseas trip, then I'll ask more interest because that's high risk. So there's this already tied like risk aspect of trade into interest. And another point we can make for necessity of interest is, you know, property markets existed since 3000s, or since Babylonians basically. And then, like, yeah, we made this point already, that capital is equivalent of land producing a revenue. So then if I'm giving you my capital, then I'm giving you my land. If I'm giving you my land, I expect a rent. And this, there's also this quote that I found somewhere. So when this also shows like how this like ancient concept of interest is so close to our, let's say, our interest concept. So when Emperor Augustus flooded Rome with treasures, interest fell down and housing prices increased. And that's also what happens here, right? If interest falls down, then we have higher housing prices. And that concept that, even though it's very old, it's the same. So there's also, not everyone appreciates interest, right? We talk that it's a natural fact of the world, but as I said, you know, not you have to accept some things. You have to accept private ownership. You have to accept, uh, yeah, again, like capitalism, I guess, in a way. And then if you look at, Aristo says money is invented to be used for exchange, not to multiply. So he was against zero interest. And if you look at Old Testament, it's banned. In Bible, it's usually frowned upon, but in the Middle Ages, it was banned. And in Quran, it's banned. And yeah, if you ask Marx, he will say it's a tool to keep the rich rich. So not everyone is for interest. Just wanted to make this point. So now we're coming back to. So Torah isn't it the Old Testament already, or?
Part of it.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay. Actually, I didn't know the Old Testament is counted as Torah.
I'm not an expert. Like, so it's actually banned for Jews, for Muslims.
And Muslims, yes.
For Christians, I think it's you can see still examples. It's not that strict, if I'm not wrong. At least that's what I understand. In the Middle Ages, it was banned, but then it was like lawful and something like that. So you now we try to look at. So we paused at the Middle Ages. We did a bit of a philosophy, and now we're back to. Also philosophy, also let's say since 1500. So the interest rate, as I said, the interest was illegal in Europe in the Middle Ages, and it becomes legal again at 1500s, and then like there are some developments that I think were interesting. So now that interest is legal, people want to decrease it even further, and then they are trying to make this case for, can we like revive the economy using interest? So when you look at England at 1664, you have this Great Plague and you have this Great Fire of London, and then England is trying to, like, now that they have lost a lot of chunk of trade at this time, then they're trying to really increase their trade by lowering the interest. Maybe there's a slide that is appropriate here. I just want to give it a quick slide. So when we look at like interest so again in England, I think it was unlawful to a certain degree. So in like France and Netherlands and Italy and England, you can see like how rates are declining. And around this time in England, you see that in 1600s, still like when this interest has become legal, like more European countries, Italy and Netherlands, are enjoying much lower interest. So now the English are trying to use can we just revive our economy using just lowering interest? That was that's an interesting discussion, I think, because the maximum rate was around this time changed from 10 to 4%, so a dramatic decrease. So the reason I was interested in this discussion, as I said, I'm not following the book one-to-one, but this particular discussion is a time where people thought, can we control interest for the first time? We will control interest and we will make England great again. And then can they, is the question. And the arguments were it will make the landowners richer because land price would go up if you decrease the interest. And we have this argument between Josiah Child and John Locke. So John Locke is like is a philosopher, like founder of liberalism, that kind of person. And this Josiah Child is another government official who will go on to lead the East India Company, but for England. But they have this debate on interest. Like John Locke is for high interest. He says he has some arguments I'll go over, and then Josiah Child is, hey, let's drop down the interest as much as the Dutch do, like because they enjoy low interest, and then we will be great nation like them. Like what? That's why the Dutch are rich, because the interest is low, and he was trying to push this interest to go low. And then John Locke's arguments is interest rate. Again, this is a liberal person, maybe founder of liberalism. He says interest rate should stay as its natural rate, which is, in his view, 6%, which was, I think, at the time of this debate happening, like 1600s, I think. Yeah, but no, I'm okay. Yes, at end of 1600s, like then they have this debate like in their parliament, and this he says that low interest creates too many laws, so anybody can get loan, and now they will just invest in anywhere, and it will be unproductive, and then they will not be able to pay it back. And then he's also saying that deceitful or skillful, however you want to call, those kind of people will be able to get more loans, and the average person will not get much loans because they're not so skillful or deceitful. And then the pool will remain poor. And then the asset price inflation, he was predicting that it will only benefit the rich and also just the big city like London, and the rest of the country will not benefit from this price increase of the land. So then what do we gain? And that was his reasoning. And then Josiah Child says, hey, like low interest makes trade thrive. That's why the Dutch are rich. If we just lower, we'll be just as rich as them. And then it will increase land value because you're mostly pitching to rich people, and they like this idea. And then it says like if you make low interest, then there will be abundant credit, and it will actually be better for the public. So it's not just for the rich. He's trying to make a case. But who wins this argument? John Locke wins it because I think he's just a better at arguing. But until I think he's alive around like 1660 and 1690, they don't lower this interest at 6% from 6%. But then after he dies, they lower it down to yes.
In this, what is the definition of value that you say, for example, for low interest? If you have a low interest society, the value of land increases.
Yeah.
How low
I think
interest can be linked to higher value of land?
I think just that the prices of land, price is a better word maybe, not a value, but prices of land would increase, like with low interest, because people are now able to get more interest, right? Yeah. Loans, more credit, just like now, when you decrease the interest, yeah, I think it's the same concept. Yeah. But you're right on the word's choice of value versus price. Maybe I should have said price, because maybe inherently the value stays the same. That's it.
Is this also the time when money was still linked to gold?
Yeah, I think until 1913.
71.
Yeah, fiat money was 71. Yeah, I think.
1970. This is still real money. This is
Yeah. So we have until 1913 that money is linked to gold 1-to-1.
Yeah.
From 1913 to I think 71, we have also this like gold exchange standard, which is any like the money of any the bond of any like trustable foreign nation, which is the United States. You can also keep it as a 1-to-1 back to dollar, and then 1971 that link is completely broken.
So if England reduces by controlling interest rate, they're controlling gold price.
In a way, yes.
Okay.
Yes. True. Good point. Okay, just let me check if my. Okay. All right. So now we go back to like interest in Europe, and we see that the Dutch actually enjoyed the lower interest in most of the like between like 1200 to 1800, and interest decreased over time in general.
And 1700s was the Dutch golden era, right?
Yeah.
It was 1600s.
End of 16 maybe. actually, there's a okay. I'll 16. Yeah, there's a case that we talk about it. Okay. So we now there are a few cases where interest played like big role in creating a crisis in general, or where interest was an important thing. So there is the story of Mississippi Company. Yes.
Can we go back to actually it's very interesting thing to discuss, and I have actually no information or knowledge of that. When we say, for example, Dutch people enjoyed lowest rates in 1700s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But assuming that in that time, basically, when we talk about money, money represents value. It's not like today. I think low interest rates shows the availability of capital, the availability of values in the country to be offered to someone.
Yeah.
And I think this is just the power of this economy, who could have a lot of wealth, a lot of something valuable to offer at low rate to the people.
Yeah.
And it is just a natural consequence. It's not
the other way around.
It's not a decision to be made. For example, French people may also would like to have low interest rates in 1700, but they didn't have the wealth to afford it. It's just wealth also is governed by supply and demand. So if I have a lot of wealth, and I need actually, if I want to make a living on interest, I need to make my wealth affordable for others to get it and to pay me something back so that my wealth will increase. If I keep my bars high, no one would want that.
Yeah.
But in a society when wealth is limited, and so why I should bring my bars low then?
Very good question. I want to leave this. I don't want to answer. It's a very good point. Let's leave this to the open discussion part. But very good remark.
Add one thing to it.
Yes,
You are
please.
right, because at 1700s, Dutch gold reserves were one of the highest. And also tulips. Tulips and also ships. They were really good in all those three fronts. They were one of the early adopters of marine trade, because of which they had a lot of value. So then you
yeah.
have something valuable, and money is a mode of spreading wealth, right? So
Yeah.
then makes sense.
Yeah, good points. Again, I don't want to get into deeper. I just want to leave this for the discussion. But very good remarks, thanks. So we have this Mississippi Company. It's actually the second most valuable company in the history of the world. Do you know the first one?
Dutch East India Company.
Yes, Dutch East India Company. So this company, so Apple is worth about around 3 trillion or something like that. I'm sorry? 2 something, okay. And this company was worth at its peak 6.8 trillion. And the Dutch East India Company was worth 8 trillion.
So can you repeat the name of the first?
Dutch East India Company.
Dutch East, okay.
NOV or what was it called? VOS?
VOC.
VOC, okay. So yeah, that was the. But so this company is a very interesting, the Mississippi Company story, because it's not that long lived. But so we have this story of John Law. So this guy is actually, he kills someone in England at 20 years something age, and then he gets basically the punishment of death, and then he's so rich that they just steal him out of the prison, and he cannot be dead and stuff like that. And then he goes to France to set up a new life, but he just excels at life so much that he's actually the person who convinces the French government to, hey, like, let's set up and this is like, I think beginning of 1700s, and then he convinces them, hey, like, the English have this national bank, you need to set up a national bank, and then they call this Royal Bank, and then they basically say as what this John Law does. And John Law is then because like he creates this new bank, and he starts with, I think, like 4% lending, and then he actually brings down lending to like 2% interest. And then he's also appointed to the top of Mississippi Company, and then like the Mississippi Company buys its own stock from the credit it got from the bank, and the bank says that the value that it has is the company. So basically, they just play back and forth. One claims that its wealth comes from there, so it lends money there, and this other one says my wealth comes from this. So, and then people rush to this. Now that you have 2% interest rate, people rush to this thing. They just buy. They get a lot of credit, and they invest in this Mississippi company. And in I think 30 years of its existence, if I'm not wrong, so it's 1720 when this rate goes down to exactly 2, and at 1721 the company goes bankrupt. So basically, the moment they drop the interest rate to very low, I think very good points made by our audience as well, that when we drop the interest rate too low without any wealth, then it just doesn't balance out. And we have this another example of panic of 1825 in England. So London receives big influx of money, then interest is reduced quickly, like from 5 to 2.5%. And then because of this, but this is a more nuanced story actually, but I just want to say that, I don't know, like this Poye, this territory of, so this is the time around when England gets lots of investment for their overseas ventures, and this is like a postcard from a place called Poye, and this place doesn't even exist, but they get money for investing in this imaginary place. And because, so the argument, at least in the book, is that because the interest is so low, people now can afford to invest in like this imaginary place. And now they invest, and then 5 years later they have to pay back, and there's no money back. Oh, bye-bye. Panic occurs, and interest and crash happens. And we have this, the Dutch example, the impossible tulips. So I think this is, foreign money actually is moved to Bank of Amsterdam because traders trust Bank of Amsterdam the most. And between 1633 and 1638, like I think the bank's balance sheets increased 2/3 in just 5 years. So a lot of money created. And then interest is dropped from 8 to 4, like very fast. And then tulip mania occurs. The tulip mania is, I'm sure we're all kind of familiar with it. At 1636 to 37, the price of tulips goes up like by 200%, 200 times, not percent. Then it crashes because there's so much easy money, because of, at least the argument from the book is that there's so much easy money, now the money goes to unproductive places. So this is the last slide. I'm sorry? Sure. I don't promise to answer. But
Maybe to the open audience as well. How did they send money to Amsterdam sitting in England?
I'm sorry?
How did they send money to Amsterdam sitting in England?
In England? What?
Yeah, you're saying foreign money flew into Bank of Amsterdam.
Yeah.
But how did they send it? Yeah, most of it gets stolen.
I don't know.
How do you track that? How do you track?
There was also a stock exchange. And many people were investing in Dutch ships going to East India to bring back spices. And I think that's how money was flowing in. And,
Oh, so
going to get rich, right?
if I look at the logistics of it, me sitting in England,
You have to travel to Amsterdam
yeah,
with a lot of gold coins.
yeah. So no, assuming I don't travel to Amsterdam, I invest in the ship of Amsterdam that goes to Amsterdam, and then when it comes back, I expect more money in return. That money which I gave goes into the bank of Dutch banks, is it?
I assume that
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
That's a workable logistic. Okay.
So this is my last slide from that I talk about history of, let's say, interest. And I think this is important because this guy was actually born around the time when this mania happened, and the crisis of 1825 in England. And he comes up. He's an economist, and he comes up with a rule on how to address banking panics and how to in times of crisis how to lend. So when we had COVID, what we did was zero interest, just give money, and that's not what he would have done, as the argument. So lending, I think, should only be given even in crisis times, to against some solid or valuable collateral. And then I think so. When you look at, I skipped 19. I was about to talk about the 1930s crash in the Great Depression in the United States, but it was by itself. It's a 1-hour topic, so I didn't want to get in. But so Ben Bernanke, the president of Fed around I think right after the financial crisis, is when you look at his papers, he cites this economist more than any other. And the reason is because his argument is that, yes, in times of crisis, banks should lend more, but against high collaterals and not to everyone. So it shouldn't be free money to everyone, but free money to, or let's say easier money to some people. And I think that was the case also the book is making, that, there are times of crisis, but you shouldn't just give free money. So how can we earn from interest? We can have savings accounts. So this savings account will give you money, and you can maybe it has lower return, but you can take your money out anytime with some limits. But yeah, you can. But you can also commit to a longer term with a certificate of deposits. You can say, hey, I'm giving my money for 6 months, but I get a higher return, or in 5 years, or so on. So it's a bit higher return than savings account, but then you cannot access your funds. And then you can buy government or corporate bonds. Then again, if you buy a 6-month bond, then you cannot access that money until that bond is paid. So you can just invest in money market ETFs, money market funds, and then they will invest in interest for you and give you back the money. So that's also another way. And that's the end of my presentation. I would rather not, take questions. As I said, I'm no expert. I'm an enthusiast, just as you. Then we can turn this into a roundtable discussion. Then we can just talk.
Thank you.